Everyone always says the 50s were the best decade for westerns. You've got obvious classics, Rio Bravo, Shane, The Searchers. But the thing is, there was another side to the 50s western. Movies nobody mentions now. Stuff way darker, way weirder, and even banned sometimes. You've got Orson Welles hunting immigrants in the only western he ever made. You've got scalping so brutal they freaked out censors, and you've got basically an early version of Dances with Wolves directed by Sam Fuller. These are some of the best westerns from the 50s nobody talks about today. Alan Dwan is a legendary director from the silent era, and even decades later he was still at it. Over 400 movies total. Woman They Almost Lynched isn't your typical forgotten gem. It's something completely different. You've got a town called Border City, right between Missouri and Arkansas, refusing to take sides during the Civil War. They're neutral, and they'll hang any troublemaker north or south who stirs things up. And the whole place is run by women. Joan Leslie plays the tough, resourceful lead, tangled up with a gang of outlaws, but the movie really ignites because of her rivalry with Audrey Totter's bloodthirsty Kate. These two start off hating each other's guts at the scene of a Union massacre, and it just escalates from there. Shouting matches, barroom catfights, even a full-on gun duel in the middle of town. Neither backs down, neither lets up. The movie's clearly cheap, obviously no huge budget. But performances are lively, especially Leslie and Totter. It's totally their show. Critics often mention Johnny Guitar as the big, symbolic feminist western from the 50s, but Woman They Almost Lynched is way crazier, mainly because everybody in it acts completely convinced they're the sane ones. Samuel Fuller directed some of the toughest war movies ever made, stuff like Steel Helmet, the big red one. But he also made westerns, and Run of the Arrow is like an early, gritty, way shorter version of Dances with Wolves. Rod Steiger plays a Confederate soldier, Irish background, who just can't deal with losing the Civil War. So he heads west, ends up joining a Sioux tribe, marries into it, has a foster son. Eventually, he's forced to choose sides when the tribe goes to war with the US Army. And because this is Sam Fuller, it's brutally honest, graphic even for the 50s. There's a torture scene where a guy is tied down, arrows fired at him, one actually hitting him. You get scalpings, beatings, violence so intense European censors panicked. Britain in particular freaked out and threatened to ban it. They made Fuller cut the worst scenes just to get an X certificate, which meant no one under 16 could see it back then. This is a western about illegal immigration. Pretty relevant today. The story's simple. You've got a corrupt businessman named Virgil Rentschler who basically owns the town. He thinks he's above the law, especially when it comes to exploiting migrant workers. When one of them is murdered, the local sheriff, played by Jeff Chandler, steps up to take him down. Of course, the sheriff ends up completely alone against Rentschler and the entire town. Rentschler is played by Orson Welles, and he's here purely because he needed quick money to settle his tax debts. And even though Wells's character brags about his ranch being bigger than 5 European countries, the movie had zero budget. Producer Albert Zugsmith couldn't even afford to show a single cow on screen. The film itself isn't some masterpiece, but it is special for Welles. It's literally the only western he ever made. More importantly, it led to Welles working closely with Zugsmith, who shortly afterward got him back directing in Hollywood with Touch of Evil. Originally, Man in the Shadow was stuck at the bottom of double features, totally overlooked, but the few who saw it knew it was worth it. The Civil War rivalry thing was big in the 50s. Two Flags West does it better than most. Confederate prisoners and Union soldiers are forced together, teaming up against a Native American attack. Of course, old rivalries flare up, tension everywhere. The movie's crowning moment is the siege of Fort Thorne. Huge-scale battle scenes, hundreds of extras, arrows and bullets flying everywhere, fires burning down buildings, and tons of action. People die, main characters too. No happy sing-along ending here. Real consequences, real emotional stakes. Jeff Chandler gives one of his best performances, and it's a wonder this got through the strict censorship code because it's seriously violent. Dramatic, intense, and unfairly forgotten, Two Flags West deserves way more attention than it ever got. Back in the 50s, 20th Century Fox set up a separate, lower-budget label called Regal Pictures for movies they thought weren't good enough for their main brand. But here's the thing. Regal films were often just as good, sometimes even better. And The Quiet Gun is a perfect example. Forrest Tucker plays a sheriff whose best friend is accused of murder and some pretty scandalous behavior. The town wants to lynch him, but Tucker's sheriff stands firm and tries to uphold the law. It's way smarter than your typical B-Western, with surprisingly strong writing. The original story comes from Lauren Payne, who later wrote the novel behind Kevin Costner's Open Range. You've got great performances here from Forrest Tucker, Jim Davis, Kathleen Crowley, and Mara Corday, who weren't just pretty faces, they delivered real acting chops. With such a strong cast and a really sharp screenplay, it's a mystery why The Quiet Gun didn't get more recognition. This one's a strange little western. You've got two big stars, Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray, who already made a classic, Double Indemnity, back in the 40s. But for some reason, Warner Brothers decided to shoot this one in black and white 3D. Why they thought that'd pull audiences from their TV sets is anybody's guess. Fred MacMurray plays a cattle rustler who narrowly escapes getting lynched when a mob grabs the wrong guy by mistake. After escaping, Fred heads home, decides he's done rustling, and moves on to bank robbery. Of course, he's really there to win back his old sweetheart, Barbara Stanwyck, except now she's dating his younger brother, played by William Ching. The plot goes from questionable to flat-out ridiculous pretty fast, but somehow director Roy Rowland manages a few decent scenes. There's a solid opening lynching scene, a pretty good fistfight between Fred MacMurray and Ward Bond, and a genuinely cool horseback chase through a waterfall, probably awesome to see in 3D at the time. The Capture is an interesting little psychological western directed by John Sturges, way before he did his legendary movies like The Great Escape or Magnificent Seven. It's about a fugitive, badly wounded, who explains to a priest exactly how he got into this mess he's in. An ex-oilman mistakenly kills a guy he thinks stole a payroll. He's immediately consumed by guilt, so there's a whole psychological angle going on. On top of that, it's also a legit mystery as he tries figuring out who actually stole the money. And if that's not enough, this film was written by Niven Bush, the guy behind other psychological westerns like Pursued and the famously twisted Duel in the Sun. Bush actually financed this movie himself, which is pretty impressive. It's generally a smart, original script, but there's definitely a few weird choices. Victor Jory, usually reliable, gives a pretty stiff performance, and some dialogue scenes get way too repetitive. But Sturges makes the most of what he has. The cinematographer, Edward Kronjäger, gives the movie a great look with genuinely moody Mexican backdrops. Even with some awkwardness, the film holds up as a unique and intriguing western, especially if you're into psychological layers and unexpected plot twists. Tab Hunter always felt Gunman's Walk was one of the best movies he ever did, because it let him prove he was actually a good actor, not just a pretty face or teen idol, and he was right. Directed by Phil Carlson, famous for gritty crime thrillers like The Phoenix City Story, this western's got that same tough edge. Hunter plays a spoiled, violent son of a wealthy rancher, a guy who thinks he can do whatever he wants because his dad always bails him out. He's cocky, arrogant, and increasingly dangerous. Hunter totally nails it. You see him tightening up, slowly losing it, like a bomb waiting to explode. Van Heflin's great as the dad, who's either too busy or too blind to realize his son's a total psycho. Robert Simon's also solid as the town sheriff, who finally decides he can't keep giving the kid a free pass. Even Mickey Shaughnessy, usually stuck in goofy comic roles, is perfect here as the deputy who doesn't want to believe Hunter's really that bad. Carlson's direction is sharp and quick, exactly what you'd expect from him. Forget the bland title, this one's totally worth seeing just for Tab Hunter's performance alone. Randolph Scott made a ton of westerns, but The Tall T stands out. This is about as straightforward as westerns get. Randolph Scott gets kidnapped along with an heiress by 3 brutal bandits. And from there, it's all survival, tension, and figuring out how they're gonna make it out alive. This movie marks the first big-screen adaptation of an Elmore Leonard story. Martin Scorsese even praised this one. It's exactly the kind of pure, stripped-down western he's always loved. It was produced by Randolph Scott's own company, Renown, and directed by Bud Baedeker, one of Scott's closest friends. The photography, done in Technicolor by Charles Lawton, is stunning. Burt Kennedy's screenplay, adapted from Leonard's story, is super tight and sharp, no wasted dialogue or boring scenes. And unlike most westerns, the villains feel genuinely dangerous. You buy these guys as actual threats, not just typical western bad guys. Every moment pushes the story forward, nothing fancy, just simple, incredibly effective filmmaking. Another Randolph Scott western, but this one mixes things up with a little mystery. Scott plays Andrew Barclay, a smooth, sophisticated guy who somehow ends up helping out a robber named Tanner, played by Forrest Tucker, who's hidden a fortune in stolen gold. Everyone wants their hands on it, and the whole territory's chasing it. But what sets it apart is the central mystery. Who exactly is Scott's character? How does this polished city guy handle himself so well out west? Why is he helping a criminal? Even Tucker's character can't figure it out. Scott's charisma really carries the movie. Like John Wayne later or Schwarzenegger decades after, Randolph Scott basically always played himself, but his personality was enough to hold audiences. It's easy rooting for him here, even when you're not quite sure what his motives are. Aside from the mystery, you've got all the usual Western stuff. Stunt riding, gunfights, a pretty good romance, and incredible scenery around Lone Pine, California. It's not Scott's absolute greatest film, but it's solid entertainment and proves why he was such a huge star back in the day.